Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Doomed Productions podcast hosted by us, Doomed Productions. I'm Ethan.
I'm Jordan.
And this is a place where we get to sit down, have some longer discussions about a variety of topics, a bit more unfiltered talk from us. So it's like we're hanging out on the couch and we talk about things that are both about specifically like the film industry or filmmaking, but also just about feature films that we make or other no-budget filmmakers like us make. Or some people might know us as folk filmmakers. And that's specifically what we're going to talk about today a little bit. So folk filmmaking means a lot of things to a lot of people. We're just going to kind of go back a little bit on where it started and then also move forward into kind of where we fit in. And that's kind of what this podcast is going to be all about today. So without further ado, let's dive back in time a little ways. So you might firstly be wondering, folk filmmaking, what the heck is this guy talking about? Which is a really great, valid question.
And honestly, this podcast is for those people. It's for, if you've heard the term folk filmmaking and you're like, what's that? Or you keep seeing that word pop up here and there on YouTube or online in general, and you're curious what it is, this is your first stop.
Yeah.
But not your last stop, hopefully.
Hopefully.
We kind of want to talk, we just want to, a nice little introductory course to anyone who maybe doesn't want to dedicate to watching a bunch of movies, but rather they just want all the information in one place.
Yeah. So that's what this is.
Yeah.
So going backwards a little bit, you may know about stuff like indie film or independent filmmaking, which is...
When people say independent movies, what do you think they mean by that?
Like A24 nowadays, which is hardly independent. That's there's millions of dollars backing those movies. So that's not, independent. Where that kind of originally was coming from was a bit more, small budget films and all that. But
it's relative to Hollywood.
It's relative to Hollywood.
In Hollywood, where they're spending $250 million on a movie, I guess A24 is low budget.
Yeah.
Compared to Hollywood, but compared to other filmmakers who are outside of the film industry, or maybe still within the film industry, just very small fishes. A couple $1 million, that's still a lot of money.
You're not forking that out of your own wallet usually. Yeah. That's coming from investors or producers or all kinds of people who are giving you that money. Not attainable to the average human.
Yeah. I think what most filmmakers who are aware of independent movies, they probably think of like guys like Robert Rodriguez,
Kevin Smith,
the Duplass brothers.
Yeah.
And I would say the Duplass brothers, at least initially, I don't know how they operate today, but they are definitely a more real, but kind of, not traditional is not the right word. Mm-hmm. Like when you think about independent filmmakers who didn't have any connection, who made some good movies, took it to festivals, made a name for themselves, owned everything themselves, and continue to work and make movies. I think the Duplass brothers are like a prime example of that, as well as Jim Cummings.
Yes.
Jim Cummings. I think when you hear independent filmmaking, you think of guys like that, I think, much more than Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez. Because Robert Rodriguez is like...
he's a big name director now.
He just
did Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Boba Fett. He did Alita. Still love him. Still love all that stuff. But
it's been a long time since he was in that game.
Yeah. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I guess you could kind of look at these weird movements of independent filmmaking where there was that kind of Gen X explosion in the 90s where they were kind of like the Sundance generation. Like, at the time, the Sundance Film Festival was so small and not... I mean, lots of people submitted to it, but it was a lot easier to get in, if that makes sense, because there wasn't
tens of thousands of submissions.
Yeah, and so of course the cream rises to the top with back then, and so guys came up from like Tarantino, Smith, Rodriguez, Richard Linklater. So you kind of think, okay, that was the '90s independent film movement.
Yeah,
I couldn't honestly tell you, outside of if there was anything between that and mumblecore. I'm sure there was. Mm-hmm. Can you think of anything? Mumblecore seems like the next significant movement in terms of independent filmmaking.
I think it was.
Yeah, so when you think of mumblecore, that's stuff like again, the Duplass brothers stuff, Greta Gerwig, Lena Dunham, the guy who did that thing, which I can't remember. But mumblecore was essentially, I mean, taking a step back, actually, the 90s filmmaker, independent Sundance generation.
Yeah.
Was there anything that characterized them stylistically, genre-wise? I mean, was there anything that seemed different about them from prior generations of filmmaking?
Like you're talking prior generations just of indie or just in general?
In general, like when you look at those movies, what made those movies stand out? What was characteristic that made you look at a movie and go, oh, that was clearly done by an independent
Well,
filmmaker?
I think part of it, what jumps out in my head first is you can kind of see the rough edges of it. It's not like a perfectly polished Hollywood movie. Like there's this kind of this like grit, I guess, to a lot of those movies in indie film.
Sometimes
like
literal grit.
Literal grit. Like I mean, I think of stuff like from Robert Rodriguez, like his mariachi movie, like that kind of stuff where it's like you can tell that's just like when he's like running around like escaping and like the little chase scenes, like that's just a guy running around on top of buildings, like doing the stunts for real, like like there's no, it kind of feels like it's going back to an earlier time of Hollywood where just you just did it. And I think that's a lot of it's just like the rule breaking, the stylizing of just like
I think rule breaking is a great way to put it. There was a lot of formal things that they did differently from classical Hollywood or even 70s Hollywood. Like you would have characters referencing other movies. Now, this wasn't brand spanking new, but there was a big prominence of like characters talking about pop culture, I feel like, in some of those movies. Like you think about the opening scene of Reservoir Dogs. Yeah. Well, again, is that 100% an independent movie?
I think of Clerks too.
Clerks as well. But those are two, I guess, when you think of independent 90s, those are two movies where it's like, oh my gosh, they're talking about movies in this movie. They I mean, Clerks, all those conversations, there is drama to it, but a lot of it is contextualized within pop culture references. Yeah. And kind of their language is a little more vulgar. That's something. I mean, each filmmaker is an individual, of course, and they all had their own stylistic kind of thing going on, and they weren't all the same. We're not trying to blanket all of these different filmmakers, but these are just some things that come to mind when you think about.
This is a pit stop in that time of
90s,
filmmaking.
When you think about 90s filmmaking, I think also it's important to clarify. I can't remember if not. I think the Dogma 95 movement in Denmark, I think that was independent. I think that was independent of the studio system there. Let's see. I'm going to do a quick Google search.
We're our fact checkers here.
I know. It was a filmmaking movement. I don't know if these guys were all... You know, if you know the Dogma 95 movement, let me know. Let us know in the comments down below if they were working within the studio system or with the outside of it. I think they were outside of it. However, we're not going to touch on that because I think we're focusing a little more on...
Just indie.
Well, we're focusing on U.S. Continental, which is selfish of us. Sorry. But, you know, we could... As soon as we open that can of worms of like all international cinema, that kind of changes things. We're talking about kind of...
We're keeping it local.
Relatively local. But yeah, I think you have a 90s movement of like both in U.S. and in Denmark and probably in other countries. You have lots of you have independent cinema blossoming.
Yeah. It's kind of like 90s. This next... The ceiling has dropped a little bit in terms of like people are... Like it's not just Hollywood that has access to this stuff. It feels like it's gone down a level.
Well, I think there's a level of like people watching these movies like Slacker and going, oh, this counts as a movie? I could do that. And, you know, it costs money to rent this gear and all that stuff. But at the same time, they weren't using it to make Star Wars. They're using it to film people talking, which was a big deal at the time. Yeah. Anyways, one step forward, two steps back. Then we come to the mumblecore movement. Now, again, we're kind of glossing over things, Dogma 95 and probably some other movements here and there. Mumblecore is characterized, it's literally people just talking. And the camera work, it will vary. Sometimes it's very static, other times it's very handheld and looks kind of pseudo documentary. But it's that kind of movement was an official movement. Like, no one started the 90s movement. People did start the Dogma 95 movement, but no one started the mumblecore. It was all these filmmakers who started making movies about their lives and just their characters, and kind of structuring their productions about, like, what do we have access to, who are people we know, and let's just make a movie about that.
Yeah.
And I guess it wasn't that different from, like, El Mariachi, because Robert Rodriguez is like, I have a turtle, I have a guitar, I have a friend, let's make a movie. And I have a small town.
Yeah.
Mumblecore was even, like, more stripped down. It was like, okay, I have a bunch of friends, I have a chair I can burn, let's make the puffy chair. And the climax of the movie will be, we're burning a chair.
Yeah.
And again, that's the Duplass brothers, that's Greta Gerwig, I think Joe Johnson or Joe Swanson, what's his name? Joe Swanberg? Is that his name? I think. Yes, Joe Swanberg, that was his name. So a lot of these movies are just, I guess you'd think of them as independent dramas for the most part, of just people just talking.
Yeah.
And even their genre movies, like Creep, those are examples of, like, they dip their toe into other genres, but again, it's kind of propelled by the fact of, like, hey, making movies is cheap to use. It's cheap to do these days.
Yeah.
They were working a lot with DSLRs and really cheap cameras. And
which was a whole other change too, and when DSLR filmmaking became a thing, that, like, opened the floodgates.
Yeah.
Because it didn't, like, before it was mini DV tapes, or maybe you had a digital camcorder.
Yeah.
But yeah, once DSLR, like, that quality you could get from a lens, like a photo lens, that was incredible. That, like, changed the game for a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah, and that's that digital technology is really where mumblecore comes in, and how that affects that movement. Because suddenly it's really cheap to make a movie. It was expensive to make movies back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Coming into the mid-2000s, it's actually not that expensive. In fact, anybody can do it.
Everyone's got a computer. Everyone's got,
can
access
get
to
a camera.
Relatively easy access.
What's
like,
the Mark
the digital age?
The Mark Duplass thing where he's like,
take it to Best Buy. Go to Best Buy, buy a camera.
Buy a camera, then return it after,
within 30 days.
Within 30 days, and make your movie
back
for free.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what the mumblecore movement was kind of sparked by, like this access, the true democratization of filmmaking equipment, and now anybody can do it. We don't need to make a Hollywood movie. We can kind of just make a movie with our friends and put that. And I think the mumblecore movement, in terms of, now I'm sure I might be wrong, but from my observations, from what I kind of remember, it seems to be those filmmakers were submitting to festivals and going a very traditional route of, like, we're gonna lean into the Sundance kind of thing. We're gonna make our movie, we're gonna submit it to Sundance, and then we're gonna get attention and hopefully get funding for the next movie, which we're gonna make the exact same way. Mark Duplass has that famous, we just referenced
Make
it,
a $1,000 movie.
Make a $1,000 movie speech. What was that? Was that at TIFF? Was that at Sundance?
That was at South by Southwest.
South by Southwest. Okay. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's Mark Duplass. It's like an hour long.
30 minutes. It's
shorter?
It's shorter.
Perfect. 30-minute homework right there. He has a speech at South by Southwest. Make your $1,000 movie. That was the model of mumblecore filmmaking. Make a $1,000 movie. Make it for really cheap. Then do it again, and just keep doing it over and over again. And eventually, you're going to move up, and you're going to own all your stuff. And I mean, just look at the Duplass brothers. They're pretty much household names when it comes to filmmakers. Maybe not everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
But Greta Gerwig, didn't she win an Oscar or something? I think she did. She was nominated for a couple Oscars since then.
Yeah.
Because she did Lady Bird and Little Women recently. Noah Baumbach is another guy. I don't know if he's technically mumblecore, but his style is very similar to mumblecore. Anyways, that was mumblecore.
Yeah.
Now, that was a long preamble. Now, folk filmmaking seems to be the next step in that journey.
Yeah.
What is, I guess, answering the question we asked at the beginning, what is folk filmmaking?
Yeah. Folk filmmaking is making a movie that you are intending to release online on YouTube for free.
That's a short answer.
That's the short answer of what it is.
If that's all you wanted to know, stop listening right here.
Yeah.
That's all folk filmmaking is. It is a distribution method.
Yeah, that's all it is.
Now, what I guess is different about folk filmmaking from the other kind of generations or film movements in the past?
Yeah. So, I mean, folk filmmaking has kind of latched on to that idea of, it's bred out of the continued democratization of filmmaking, where we're now in an age where everyone has YouTube, everyone's got a phone in their pocket, everyone's got some way of making a movie. So it's kind of one of those things where it gets to that point of where all the fluff is stripped away of what needs to happen to be a movie. It's just
yes,
it's that kind of that next step in that journey.
With mumblecore, the technology was democratized, but the distribution was not.
Yeah.
With folk filmmaking, the distribution is what's democratized.
Exactly.
Rather than the way it's taught in film schools is make a movie, submit it to Sundance, submit it to a bunch of film festivals. Hopefully the right eyes get on it and your movie gets picked up, distributed, bought. Worst case scenario, you throw it up on Amazon Prime, make some money.
Worst case scenario after that is throw it on Vimeo.
Yeah, even worst case. And YouTube is like, oh God, no. Yeah. I'm never doing that. With folk filmmaking, it's the opposite. YouTube is where the goal is intended.
That's the first step.
That is the first step. And you're not going to a film festival. You're not trying to sell it. You're not trying to get any necessarily attention from industry types. It's let's make this, put it out there so people can see it.
Yeah.
Why would anyone do this? You might be wondering. What are the benefits? Why would someone why are all these filmmakers? Well, first off, did anyone sit down and decide this would be a thing? This would be a movement?
No. I feel like the general consensus of what I've heard from other people who are folk filmmakers or whatever they identify as, who are doing this, is they thought they were the only ones. Or maybe they had another friend in the same city as them or a town over, and they were all making movies and putting them online. But then during COVID, I feel like was when the spark landed on the fuel, because that's when everyone kind of realized, oh, there's other people. And it kind of, it grew it kind of slow at first, where just a couple people in different cities across the U.S. were finding each other. Now it feels like every place on earth has someone who's discovering this, and it's kind of crazy how fast it's growing.
It's one of those things where it was really what kind of brought a lot of people together were like, well, I mean, everybody has their own story with how they got into doing it. But like you said, everybody was it seems to be most people who do it aren't aware of folk filmmaking, or weren't aware of folk filmmaking. In fact, there's a big playlist out there by the 922 Films channel called Folk Filmmaking Playlist. Check it out.
Yeah. I think they have it broken up by years now, where they have like 2022 and then everything before.
There's also a folkflicks channel,
yeah,
which is run by the Don't Tell Show, another great resource for finding out more. But the term folk filmmaking was coined by Dan Lotz of 922 Films.
Yeah.
He didn't start folk filmmaking.
He just named it.
He just named it, essentially. And if you want to learn more about it, I would recommend going to his channel in terms of kind of finding movies or finding resources, that kind of thing.
He's done a lot of work to try and bring awareness and attention to it.
And I can't think of another way that brought people together too, because he and Joel Haver and Cody Clark, to an extent, I think. Cody, I don't think he identifies as a folk filmmaker. He's not particularly fond of the term, but his impact as a filmmaker online, I think, is undeniable. I think he had an audience and a voice, and he reached people, and he was doing this kind of stuff for a long, long time. So years. I don't want to leave his work out of this conversation.
No, absolutely not.
And I think I'm getting on a tangent here. But anyways, there were a couple of people who definitely helped bring people together. And maybe they weren't all doing it. Maybe it was just people finding each other naturally and a natural community forming out of it. I mean, there's people we've spoken to online I guess we know of online that we've never spoken to, but we're like, oh my gosh, we feel like brothers to them because we're making feature films online for free and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And going back to how slowly this has grown, or how, like, again, people don't know, there are people in that folk filmmaking playlist that Dan has made
Yeah.
that definitely don't know that they're on it even.
Yes.
Like, I feel like that was really common a year and a half ago,
Mm-hmm.
and still is pretty common now.
Yeah.
That it's still just it's still forming, and it's just kind of this morphing thing still, but it's definitely got an identity. But
And I think as this community has kind of grown, I guess, there has been a more conscious, I guess,
there's a self-awareness.
there's now it's a little more self-aware, which might be good, might be bad. I don't know. That's for people to decide themselves.
Yeah.
But before, I think everybody gets into it the same way, where it's like, hey, I just made this thing, I'm throwing it up online for free. Then you discover this growing community of YouTubers.
Or they discover you.
Or they discover you. And I think maybe folk filmmaking might be strange. Like, if I was talking to, like, my grandma or someone who has no idea about filmmaking, maybe I wouldn't use the term folk filmmaking. I use the term YouTube filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because that's a little more indicative of what it is and kind of paints a clearer picture of this is making movies for YouTube for free, feature-length films.
Yeah.
And I think that might be, I mean, that's really what it is. Now, I guess I asked the question and then we totally got on a bajillion tangents, but why would anyone release a movie for YouTube that's a feature length?
Yeah. Well, going back to that original film school model of you make your movie to go into a film festival praying that it gets found and you move up the ladder one rung or something like that. If your movie you pour all this time, money, and resources into, and that's the end goal, is hoping that you maybe have someone watch it. If that doesn't happen and you fail, like, that is, like, there's no way around it. That is a absolute, like, cataclysmic failure for your movie. Like, it's failing at its only goal.
Yeah.
And that could be, you know, for some people that could be the make or break. Like, if your movie doesn't make it into this film festival, like, you're done.
Yeah.
What folk filmmaking does is it says, we don't care if people watch our movie. We make movies because we want to, not because we want people to see our movies. So, well, I mean, ideally people watch them, but I mean, we've had this conversation before between the two of us. If no one ever saw Video Carnage, we'd still be happy we made it.
Yeah.
Video Carnage being one of our movies, if you're new to this. But anyways, you're a filmmaker first because you make movies, not because you just want to be a filmmaker. So we make movies, and that's why people put them online on YouTube, is even if my movie I upload gets 10 views in a year, like, there's still always, like, that potential of it. I feel like it retains that potential of being able to be seen forever. And
YouTube videos can blow up all of a sudden with no explanation.
No barriers to your movie. That's also, I mean, again, that's why it's a distribution model of folk filmmaking. Is it's not you're sitting there hoping. Also, that's not the only reason, but it's just there's no reason someone couldn't see your movie. As long as they have an internet connection and they can go on YouTube, your movie is available to them at all times. And I think people who identify as folk filmmakers or independent filmmakers or whatever, or truly independent filmmakers, that's the biggest selling point, is your movie is always available to people.
Yeah. I think when it comes to what makes folk filmmaking and YouTube filmmaking so different is it kind of looks at the traditional route. So to make it in Hollywood, in the industry, you got to start off as a PA. You got to do a lot of kind of groundwork, like set level or below the line PA, grip, gaffer kind of work.
Yeah.
You have to start off on the bottom of the totem pole. You work your way up. If you want to be a film director, you are working up the ladder, not at the chance to make your movie, but at the chance to maybe make your movie, the chance to pitch your idea to a movie, you're working your way up that ladder to come to a place where maybe you could find funding, maybe someone would listen to you, maybe someone would want to give you funding, maybe you could direct a movie, or maybe you could try to get some attention for your movie. you're not guaranteed a position as a film director working your way up that totem pole.
You're rolling the dice.
You're really rolling the dice. The other way people try to make it, in that, in Hollywood is, I'm going to go to LA. I'm just going to do anything and everything. I'm just going to try everything. I'm just going to get my name out there. Again, very hard to do, but it's possible if you meet the right people. Very, very hard to do, though.
Yeah.
There's, thousands of people in LA.
Hundreds of thousands, millions, and they're all trying the same thing.
They're trying the same thing. You've probably only heard of about 100 of them. You've heard of the celebrities. That's it. Out of thousands and thousands of people living in LA. There's lots of people who struggle and don't make it. Now, some people becoming a big director, maybe that's not all the goal. Maybe some people just want to be a first AD, and that's cool with them, or some people just want to be a producer. That's totally fine. This isn't about that. We're talking about the filmmaker, someone who wants to write and direct, or just direct. That's been the industry kind of model for a long, long time. The other way of getting into maybe the industry or just an independent cinema is make a movie, as we said, submit it to a bunch of festivals, get it seen by the right people who will ideally fund your next movie or sell your current movie, and then you'll find more opportunities.
Yeah.
Again, very difficult to do, very, very uncertain, a lot of uncertainties. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but it's very uncertain because as a filmmaker, when you make your movie, it becomes this thing where it's a gamble. It's a financial risk because you spend a lot of money on your movie. You have spent a lot of money submitting it to places. And people won't, it probably won't even get in. If like the right festival, like Sundance, they get thousands of movies submitted to them each year. And the ones they play are the ones with like celebrities in them usually. Yeah. It doesn't always get in. The thing about that festival model is that, again, it doesn't guarantee you that your movie will get seen by the right people. It's a potential chance that maybe it'll play in a festival. And if it isn't, and it might get seen by the right people who might pass it along. And then, again, go watch Mark Duplass's video. You will be strung along by producers for a long time. But what most likely will happen is it'll be seen and then just forgotten. No one will see it again. Nothing will come with it. Now, of course, it could happen. It might happen. But it probably won't if you look at the odds. And so probably what most likely will happen is then you'll put it on Amazon and it'll be behind a paywall. It won't be seen by a whole lot. That'll be kind of disappointing after a few years. And then it'll go up on YouTube and it'll eventually lie there. Now, there's 1,000 different scenarios of how this could go. But essentially what folk filmmaking does is it looks at how difficult and how uncertain that road is for trying to either make it in the industry, make it as an independent filmmaker, either to get in the industry or just survive independently of Hollywood. And it looks at that and says, that's a lot of BS I got to deal with. That's a lot of uncertainty. That's a lot of struggle. Not that the struggle isn't worth it, but you're not even guaranteed to make your movie or make your next movie out of it. It's a guarantee to it's an uncertain potential of maybe getting a chance to pitch something or make something.
Yeah.
Folk filmmaking says, we're not going to do that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my thing. I'm going to spend whatever amount of money I want on this thing. It's going to be all mine, and I'm going to distribute it on YouTube because, I don't care that the right people see it. I want to be seen as a filmmaker and as a human being. That's what folk filmmaking is. It's about, I want to be seen. And the best way to be seen is by putting yourself out there online for free. That could have, that applies to any art form, painting, music, whatever. If you just want to be seen and you don't care about making it in the industry, you don't care about, getting money or anything like that. Now, people can make money, but if you just want to be seen, you want your movie to be seen, your music to be heard, your paintings to be appreciated, you put it up online for free. And that's what folk filmmaking is really about. That's the mentality behind it, is I don't have to wait for anyone. I don't need a middleman. I can just go right to my audience. And hopefully an audience will follow. And that's kind of the why behind folk filmmaking.
Yeah.
Anything else we should add on that?
No, that sounded pretty good.
Okay. There's our soundbite for the... Well, we don't do sound bites really, but...
If we did, that
We
would
did.
be it.
Okay. Anyways, that's what the mentality is. Are there similarities between the work? Are there formal similarities that kind of connects all of these films together? I mean, what are things that are common in folk films? Is there anything common?
I feel like there kind of are two camps that you can fall into. And again, this is not like all encompassing. This is just generalities that I've noticed over time. But there's kind of either the more like real life, like I guess for lack of a better term, the Joel Haver style, where it's people who are talking. It's a bit more real. It's very like character driven, like talking stuff. And I'm probably not using all these perfectly, but then there's kind of this other end that we kind of camp out at, which is this more genre, experimental, weird side. And there's a whole gamut in between too. And this
In
is
terms of genre, you mean?
Yeah, I guess. And those are similarities, I guess, in like filmmaking styles.
Even that, there's spectrum, huge spectrum outside of that too. I would imagine.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I feel like we're seeing a bit more. I feel like I've been noticing more documentary style stuff popping up too. Like there's been a little bit of that. But
I
it's
think
a lot.
I think I don't. I might not disagree with you, but I think if someone was to say all folk films are X, Y, and Z, I might disagree because I think there's such a wide variety of voices that are out there.
Yeah.
It's so hard for me to compare everyone and say all of these films are connected in this way or this way. I think
Well, and I guess also like because folk films are so individualized because it is generally one person at the helm of it who's the writer, director, editor, cinematographer.
Yeah.
That's very common. Not everyone's like that, but most are.
Yeah.
It is an individual's voice.
Yeah.
Even if the actors or the crew or whoever else is helping these projects have input. And I feel like that's something else that's really valued amongst folk filmmakers is that it's more than just the director's project. Like everyone, I feel like is included in that as much as possible.
The auteur theory seems most tangible and kind of you can see it more in these films than you can in even in like I love the 70s kind of filmmakers where that idea of the auteur kind of became really popular, but I think you can see that a lot more in these YouTube movies than in the 70s because like again those 70s movies, those were all studio movies, those were all funded by Hollywood. I think the thing that connects all of them first and foremost, I mean maybe some people might disagree, I think a folk film or a YouTube film, it's got to be feature length because people for years, I mean film school would be like, what makes it different is people have been uploading short films to YouTube for years, on Vimeo for years and years and years. What makes these films unique is that they are feature length.
Yeah.
Because up until now, that was such a taboo, that was such an unheard of thing. It was like, you making a movie for YouTube? Yeah, okay, that's cool. And people would just assume that's a short film.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I'm making a feature film for YouTube, that's a whole brand new thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that they all definitely have in common. The other thing I think they have in common, well, maybe not, again, not all of them, is the copyright materials.
Yeah.
I think because of the way YouTube's algorithm, because of how YouTube runs this thing, their legalities and all that kind of stuff, YouTube is okay with you uploading a movie with copyrighted materials in it, be it footage from a copyrighted thing like a movie or a TV show or documentary, and it's also okay with you using songs. We used Dua Lipa, Lorde, Billie Eilish music in one of our movies, and YouTube was completely okay with it.
Yep.
The copyright holders will run ads on that video, and they'll get the revenue from that. So according to YouTube, you are okay to use those copyrighted materials in your movie. And that's another thing that I think maybe it doesn't sum up every single folk film, but it's something that every folk filmmaker can do if they wish. They can put in pre-existing music and clips and footage that they don't own, which is a big no-no in film festivals, which makes sense because, film festivals, they're for profit. They make money charging tickets. Obviously you can't profit off of someone else's stuff if you don't have permission. And folk filmmakers don't really profit off their stuff.
Nope.
They're not making any money. And if they do, all that money would go to YouTube or the copyright holders. So that is something that is also, I guess, new. You wouldn't see outside of folk filmmaking or internet, online, YouTube filmmaking. I should specify, it's not always just YouTube. It's also Vimeo.
Yeah.
I think the main point is that you're releasing your feature film online for free.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah.
And the potential of using copyrighted stuff is there if you want to, but not everyone does.
Yeah.
I can't really think of any other connections between overarching things between all folk films.
No.
I mean,
at the end of the day, it is
Yeah.
distribution. That is the thing that matters most to folk filmmakers.
and I think as time kind of moves on and films are forgotten and remembered and keep on going, I think there probably will be a trend. Like you'll be able to see folk films were mostly dramas or mostly science fiction or mostly this or that.
Yeah.
I think we're a little too early to say now. We're still kind of in the middle of it. And we're also kind of, I guess, should that...
It's not for us.
Well, also, should we talk about us and where we fit into this? Or, I mean, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, that's what folk filmmaking is.
That's what folk filmmaking is
laid it
as
out.
of right now.
Yeah.
And it will change and live its life and maybe die one day. Who knows?
So
it's too early to tell.
I know. I mean, I guess that is our long answer as to what folk filmmaking is. I mean, to recap the main points, it's a feature film that's released online for free that may or may not contain copyrighted music. It's literally just a distribution method.
Yeah.
It's not a way of production. It's not a means of
It's
not a movement. There's no formal people who are controlling and saying, this is what this movie will be. This is what this movie will be.
It's being okay with doing what you can do right now.
Yeah. And I think someone like Ian Hubert, while he hasn't released a feature-length thing, he's working on some long-form CG content that is very... I wouldn't even say it's Hollywood. It's very Ian Hubert. It's very unique to him. But his work is very sci-fi, very CG heavy. And to an extent, that kind of falls into this YouTube filmmaking camp of a little bit, because he released it on YouTube because he thought, hey, why not?
Yeah.
There's no other place to... no studio will necessarily want it, so I'm just going to put it online for free because that's where I want to put it. It's the Wild West. But as long as it's online for free and it's feature length, that's kind of what folk filmmaking really is. And I guess, I mean, there's probably a history that we go into with the movement and what it is or what it's not, or drama or successes or trials. Yeah. But I guess, I mean, maybe before we move on to us, what are some folk films people should check out, I guess? What are our recommendations? We've talked about this before on our podcast and in our videos, but again, this is for people who are new to folk filmmaking. So if you have never seen a YouTube folk film before, what should people check out?
I'll get the easy one out of the way. Joel Haver is a great person to check out. Island, his feature film Island, was really inspirational for the both of us, so I think that one's great to bring up. A different filmmaker that I think... and I'll ping pong this off to you. A different filmmaker that I really appreciate. This channel called Torah Films. They have a feature film called A Knot in the Web, and I feel like that is a great example of a folk film. Yeah.
That's a great one. I got to shout out our friends, our boys, RC boys.
Yeah.
Seventh, their film Seventh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Found footage style kind of movie, but with kind of a cool sci-fi twist. The less you know, the better. And also Merdul Chabur, Unmovied Productions. He has a movie called The Last Day of Childhood, which is fantastic. And also Ethan Stevens, who made Assassin and The Not Now. Those two very very great movies.
And that's all.
Well, I'm like,
no,
well,
I
I'm
know,
sure.
I know there's
Do you
so
want to?
many.
I don't want to keep just rambling.
I know. Well, there's so many. That's the
Cody
thing, too.
Clark, Ramekin.
Cody Clark, yeah, Ramekin. He's got a new movie that's coming out soon called No Shark, which is his really big project, which is going to be really cool to see.
And again, I think there's so much out there.
And there's so much we don't know.
There's so much we don't know.
But really checking out, if you want the most comprehensive place to find it, that really is the folkflicks YouTube channel,
And
or the 922 Films Folk Filmmaking playlist. Those are the places to dive into.
There's something for everybody in this big old wave of filmmakers, and
Yeah.
they're all different. We're not trying to make them all sound the same. We're not trying to.
No, honestly, if you find one and you don't like it, that's okay, because the next one you watch is going to be nothing like it.
Yeah.
So
I would just go out there, click around, search for something you like. But those are some of our favorites. I'm trying to think if there's anyone. I think that's enough.
yeah,
I mean, there's
they'll
so
find
many.
so
I
many.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Where do we fit into all this?
We just make movies.
We make movies. Yeah. So a brief version of how we got into making movies online for free. Essentially, COVID hit, derailed our plans of making feature films and the way we were doing things, and we discovered Joel Haver and Dan Lotz from 922 Films. We were like, hey, I guess it's possible to make a feature film for YouTube. And that's how we got into it, because of COVID and discovering
It was out of necessity almost at first.
and out of Joel Haver's work. So what we do is we do just that. We make feature films exclusively for YouTube. We've made, Old Brother, House,
October, Video Carnage, See You Soon,
Wild Boys 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm. And then we have some others that are on the docket to come out.
Yeah, we've got a lot more coming this year. But those are feature films that you can check out.
A whole variety of styles and tones and genres.
And personally, I mean, I think it's also, when we think about, I guess this might show how different everyone is, because everyone has a different thing. When we think about making movies, we aren't necessarily thinking we're doing this for the movement or doing this for other people, or to an extent, do we want more attention to be drawn to these movies that are being released online? Yes, obviously. Absolutely. That would be fantastic. But we don't think of ourselves as folk filmmakers necessarily. We don't think of ourselves as, independent filmmakers or no budget. We've used that label a few times, but I think at the end of the day, we just look at ourselves as filmmakers.
Yeah.
We're filmmakers who make stuff for YouTube, which by this point, we're just playing semantics. But what we do here at Doom Productions is we dream of a movie we'd always want to see, and we go out and we make that movie for YouTube. So whatever you want to call that, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we make shorts, sometimes we make features, but that's, at the end of the day, we're lucky to live in an era where making a movie has never been so cheap and so accessible. And so that's what we do at Doom Productions, is we just make our imaginations come to life, essentially. And that's where we fit into all this. So if you're interested in seeing some good movies, if I can toot our own horn, I guess, I don't know. It's all subjective. We're pretty happy with our movies overall, for the most part.
It's a fun time here.
Yeah.
At the very worst, you'll learn from our mistakes.
Yeah. Subscribe to our channel. Watch some of our movies. We got some fun stuff on our channel if you want to really dive into some good online movies you can check out for free.
And if you somehow get inspired by folk films, whether it's ours or someone else's, and it inspires you enough to make something, we want to see it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole community of people out here who do want to see it too. So just be sure, if you make something, to send it our way so we can check it out.
Yeah.
We don't promise when we'll watch it. We promise we will.
Yes, absolutely. There's, a lot of times people think that, again, I want to be heard, I want to be seen, but I don't feel like that's possible. But it is, with the internet, with YouTube, all that kind of stuff. It is possible to be seen and heard these days.
Yeah.
And we've made stuff, whether it be videos or feature films, where it's like, oh geez, it didn't feel like it got very many attention, but then fast forward a year later and it's got, thousands of views on it, and it's like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a place for everyone at the table here on YouTube
Yeah.
and online in general. It's a fun place to make stuff and get inspired and make work that you're proud of and you're happy with and to grow as an artist. So, if you've never done it before, do it. Give it a try. It's really fun, I promise.
Yeah. And there's no commitments.
Yeah.
You can do it all at the cost of nothing other than your time.
Yes. Making this movie, making movies in general for online, it really doesn't have to cost you anything. You can make a movie for free. You can also spend couple $1,000 on a movie.
It's whatever you want to do with it.
And as the viewer, and actually, here's a real quick thing. Here's another reason why you should make movies online for free. Because the cards and chips are so stacked against you as a filmmaker. In order to compete with Hollywood, you have to offer something that Hollywood doesn't. And what Hollywood cannot do is give out their stuff for free. Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, Amazon Prime, you have to pay for all that. So if you hide your stuff behind a paywall online it's a struggle for a normal person to pay for a Hollywood movie online. I know that's a real block for a lot of people. So if they don't know anybody who's involved in the movie, no name Joe from, Ohio or Montana or whatever, they're going to go with Hollywood because they pay for Netflix or whatever. They're going to go with that because of what they know. Offer your stuff online for free so people can see what you can do, essentially. Yeah. If you got to compete with Hollywood, you got to offer it up for free. That's another reason. But again, there's a philosophical, more spirited answer than just, competing with Hollywood. But also, as an audience member, if you want to watch more of these movies, again, that's a benefit to you as well because these movies don't cost you anything but time. You can, and you don't even have to watch the full thing. Watch the first minute. If you hate it, turn it off.
Doesn't cost you anything.
Exactly. Whereas if you go buy a ticket at a movie theater, you're paying for that. If you pay for HBO Max and you watch a movie, you hate it. You just paid to see something you hate.
Yep.
And that's probably why a lot of people just watch shows they like over and over again. But again, watching these movies costs you nothing, and that's a fun way to, I don't know, who doesn't like free stuff?
Who doesn't like free stuff?
Yeah, I guess
that's a good spot
to end it.
To end that discussion, yeah. This is where we move into a different discussion, though.
Yes.
Since we are filmmakers, we're always working on stuff. We like to keep our listeners in the loop to some extent on what we're doing. So I'll ask the question, Jordan, what are you working on?
I feel like I'm working on a lot of different stuff. The two things that come to mind are I'm working on storyboarding my next feature film, which we made a short film, which was kind of not a proof of concept, but it started out just as a fun short film. And I guess it turned into a proof of concept because I'm turning it into a feature called The End of Consciousness. You can check it out on our channel. I'm storyboarding that feature film project right now. And then I'm also outlining and doing a lot of writing for a lot of different projects. But there is a project we're going to do at the end of this month, end of March, that we're looking forward to. It's going to be super fun. And that's what I'm working on now. What have you been working on?
Yeah, I've been working on The Bell Rings, and then also my next feature film, if you aren't familiar. And then I'm also in the pre-writing phase of my next feature film, and also working on a script for a short film that we're working on.
Cool.
So those are my kind of three balls I'm juggling. So those are my stuff. And then the second thing we talk about, what are we watching?
Yeah.
What are you watching? You got your letterbox pulled up.
I do. And I mean, I should mention, this is coming out on Friday before the Batman has come out.
Oh, yeah.
But by this time that you're listening to this, I will have seen the Batman twice because I got tickets for Wednesday and Thursday night. I'm looking forward to that. But this last weekend, OMSI, which is the movie theater. Well, they're not. They're the museum in Portland where we're at.
But they have a really awesome movie theater inside.
It's a ginormous IMAX screen. It used to be called the OmniMax. Remember that?
I do remember that.
And they've been doing a Studio Ghibli retrospective. So this weekend I saw Princess Mononoke and Kiki's Delivery Service. So good. Loved it. I've seen them before, but it's always great to see movies on the big screen at that place. Really fun. And then also, while I was storyboarding, I watched Last Night in Soho. I watched it with the commentary because I've seen it a few times, so I watched it with the commentary, learned some fun facts, and then I watched this movie. So at the school I work at, one of the music teachers, he was like, so me and my partner have this thing where we'll go to the Dollar Tree and just pick out a bunch of Dollar Tree movies. Some of them are crap, but some of them are pretty good. And so he gave me two. I watched one of them the other night called Saint Agatha, which was a lot of, I don't want to spoil it, but I would say it's actually worth the $1 that was spent to purchase it. It's pretty fun. There's some good like horror gags in it. Do I spoil this? Do I spoil this?
I want to watch it.
This will make you want to watch it more. So I'll say this gag.
Okay.
There's a moment in which a woman who has just given birth chokes someone with the umbilical cord that's dangling out of her.
That's incredible.
And it's so much fun. Yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch. Saint Agatha, I definitely recommend. If you're good for if you love kind of like fun horror movies or whatever.
A party horror movie.
Party horror, yeah. It's a lot of fun, and actually, it had some good cinematography in it, some good use of colors and.
I see the red, a lot of red.
Yeah, so that was a fun one. So that was the most recent one I watched. Nice. What have you been watching?
Just 2 nights ago, watched 21 Jump Street with my girlfriend. It was her first time seeing it.
Nice.
So that was really fun. And I'd forgotten. I remember more of 22 Jump Street than 21. Mm-hmm. Like I forgot that Johnny Depp is in it. So that surprise hit me just as hard.
That
yeah.
That's a movie. Yeah, I remember when I saw that because for whatever reason I had seen the TV show like when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. Like back when I used to watch everything and everything. I was like, I'll watch 21 Jump Street because Johnny Depp's in it. Yeah. So seeing the old characters in the movie was like, whoa, that's cool. Yeah. Those are cameos I'll always think fondly of.
And then what else? I don't think. Yeah, then I started rewatching Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt in the last week just last night with my girlfriend because we were bored. I haven't watched the last season, but it's been a couple of years. We were like, we'll just jump in from the beginning. And
Pinot Noir,
Pinot Noir. That was the last episode we watched last night. I love that episode so much. I love Titus is my favorite character. He's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the main things I've been watching. Yeah. So, all good stuff.
Yeah. Have you gotten your tickets to see Batman yet? Why have you been waiting? You're pumped to see it.
I know. Well, because at first it was like, I should set up my schedule with my girlfriend so that we can see it together. But now I'm starting to realize I'm going on my own. I'm going on my own.
She don't care about Bat. Well, I don't know. Does she care?
She do care. Her dad cares more though. Her dad's got like a Batman bumper sticker on his car, but also when my girlfriend's nephew was born and her parents became grandparents, they were like, what should you be called? And for probably 4 months that was in the running. He was going to be called Batman.
Oh my gosh.
He's called Grumpy now, but
it's a nickname.
Yeah, like
I thought you meant
grandpa.
As a real name.
No, not the kid.
They took 4 months to decide not Batman.
No, not the kid, her dad.
Oh, I see.
Because he was going to be referred to as Batman.
Oh, okay.
But they ended up calling him Grumpy, which I'm like, that's fine, I guess.
Regal Bridgeport actually has showings starting tomorrow, actually.
I know. So I'm going to buy a ticket. I'm going to do it tonight. Like I'm going to put up my cards on the table and be like, I'm going to see this movie, but am I seeing it alone? Because I did that with No Way Home. I went and saw that on my own, which was fine. But yeah.
My girlfriend was the most excited to see No Way Home because of Daredevil.
Oh,
and it was great because when we saw it, people cheered.
That show's on my list.
And then we saw it.
People cheered at my theater too.
But when we saw it again, like that Saturday or whatever.
Oh yeah, when real audiences.
No one's cheered when Daredevil showed up, and she was so disappointed. She was like, "But people cheered the first time." Anyways.
Yeah.
Batman's gonna be
good.
It's almost 3 hours long.
I know.
I'm so excited.
Which is hard because it's a school night.
I'm seeing it with my cousin on Wednesday, and then with my girlfriend on Thursday. I'm gonna get no sleep those 2 nights.
I know it's gonna be rough.
Oh well.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all so much for listening in on our podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, click the link wherever that shows up on Spotify to hop over to our YouTube channel to subscribe and check out more stuff from us. If you're listening on YouTube, also hit subscribe, like this video, share it, because that helps us out in the algorithm and all of that, and lets more people see our stuff, and we think that's pretty cool sometimes. So be sure to like all the things, and until the next episode, we'll see you later.